What is up, guys? So this is part 2 of the hiring process video. If you haven't seen part 1, I will link it in the description below. This part is going to include the interview and the background process. So the interview process, I went through 3 interviews. They were all similar but different. One of them was like a brief meet and greet type of thing where I had to interview with the recruiter and then they gave me a background package to fill out. Another one was kind of similar. It was an interview with the recruiter, and that one did not kick off the background process. That one was actually to go into the physical training or the physical test. So theirs was like a little different order. And then the department that I actually signed with, theirs was a standard interview with the field training team. So I had 3 officers, and it was a series of questions. For the interview phase, I would say dress as best as you can. I had a cast on, so I couldn't really wear a suit, but I still wore a nice shirt, a tie, everything else. The interviews usually go in a type of, I guess they ask questions and then they rate you on your responses, like situational questions, and then they'll ask you about yourself, a little bit of your background, different things like that, and they just write numbers next to each one. So I guess the way it's viewed is like they tally it up at the end, and that's like a pass or fail. I'm not completely sure how they grade them, but I noticed that when I was doing my interviews, they were just writing numbers, and all the departments did that. So it seems like the standard all around. One of the departments, the one that I did the interview with the recruiter and then the physical test, after the physical test, they had me do another interview, which was with their, I guess, their higher ups. There was like a captain there, some lieutenants, some sergeants. It was like maybe 6 people, a panel interview. And that interview was probably the most stressful one I had to go through. They asked me a bunch of situational stuff. They asked me stuff about my background. They asked me about like schools, hobbies, and all this like random stuff that like I honestly didn't really think about. So I would say the best way to prepare for the interview is honestly looking up the department. I got a lot of like cool points, I guess, for knowing who the chief was, knowing the mission statements, knowing like the different departments they have in the police station, like SWAT, community service. I even brought up some events that they've done recently in the community and how I felt about it. And a lot of departments like that because it shows that you're actually researching and putting the work in. Another thing I did was I looked up common interview questions on like YouTube and Reddit and all that stuff, and kind of made different answers based off of different scenarios. So kind of having scenarios thought out that can apply to multiple questions. That was really helpful because a lot of the questions I didn't really expect, but I had already thought about similar questions. So it was easy to kind of change my answer around to fit the question that they were asking. So the interview phase, it's not really hard. You just kind of have to prepare yourself and look really good and make a good impression. But I will say the interview phase is where a lot of people kind of get kicked out because it is that first impression. So if you make a bad first impression, they might not even push you to the background. But if you do get pushed to the background process is probably the most tedious process in the entire hiring process, because every department I applied to, the background process, I'm pretty sure I think it was like 50 pages of background stuff. They ask about my friends, my family, credit, all my schools, my degrees, every job you've had, every place you've ever lived, every car you've owned, like your license stuff. Like there's like it's like they dissect your entire life on paper, and it is a very stressful process. And then after you fill out all these packets of questions about yourself and your background, they usually take a few weeks, sometimes even a few months to get back to you, and then they schedule you for like the polygraph or the CVSA, and that is pretty stressful because they hook you up to different machines and they go over your background stuff. It's not like they go over in detail. It's mainly like, have you done drugs? What drugs have you done? Have you ever gotten a ticket? Like kind of generic questions based off of it. But if you are lying or trigger the machine, then that disqualifies you. So if you lied on your package at some point and they ask you the question and you trigger a response, then everything you just did was for no reason. So being honest is honestly the best, because a lot of these departments are pretty forgiving depending on what you've done. Like I know I have kind of a crazy driving history. I'm into cars. I had a lot of tickets when I was a kid. A lot of them did get dismissed, but it's still like on my record, and they bypass that stuff. So you just kind of have to disclose it to them and let them decide. Another thing I would say about the background is to make sure you have your references and your jobs like filled out correctly, because one department I had to write all my family members, like 10 friends, like 5 supervisors. It was, I think I had to have 25 or 30 references, and they will email all those references. And the longer it takes your references to get back, the longer it takes them to process your background. So have reliable references and have at least like 15 people that you could reference, because that would make the process a lot easier. But yeah, that's pretty much a quick rundown of the interview and background process. If you guys have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. If you like this video, hit the like button and subscribe for part 3. Part 3 is going to be the conditional offer and medical polygraph, all the stuff after the conditional offer.